It's official on paper.
Okay, everybody on Zoom, we should be good now. Can everybody hear? Give me a thumbs up or somebody say yay.
Yes, Henry.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, from Cheryl.
Okay, thank you. You can just move your cursor over to.
I'm used to.
I know. Yeah.
I got you.
Yep.
Yeah, it comes all back.
Yep. And then back to back. Okay.
All right, I'm gonna move through this slide set pretty fast because it's 118 slides. I took 50 out. It originally was 160 some, almost 170 slides. And it lasted more than 3 hours. But you're gonna get a soils course that's equivalent of 1 year of soils college in the time that I'm here. So it's gonna be overwhelming, but your chapter 5 has got most of the information in it. So all you have to do is just refer back. This is the same presentation I've been given for 28 years. The only thing I do, I just tweak it every year, either taking something out or putting something that's new in, and there's not much new to it because usually the basics are set in stone. Soil is a living organism. And I know when I was in college, probably Carl remembers this too, you didn't call it dirt, you called it soil. If you called it dirt, you was in trouble with your agronomy teacher or professor or soils professor or whomever was teaching it.
Dirt's what's under your finger now.
That's right. And I've got a lot of that still. All right, why is soil important? Soil is the growing media for our food. If we didn't have that, we wouldn't be here on this earth. And it purifies our waste. It's a natural filtration system in our ecosystem. And it's home to our plants and animals. It takes 7,000 years to produce 1 inch of topsoil. So if you've got 8 inches of topsoil in your garden, multiply that times 7. That's how long it took to make that 8 inches of soil. The wind, water, Mother Nature can take it away from you faster than it can be replaced. And it's done that over centuries, doing that. I've seen some places in the world that gullies that's as high as these ceilings, no topsoil whatsoever. Mother Nature destroyed it with the help of the human part of it. And we are losing, just like I said, we are losing so much soil to erosion each year that the loss of soil can be loaded into dump trucks parked back to back from the moon and back. You're talking 240,000 miles. That's a lot of soil. So you need to take care of it. TLC. And an earthworm can work a ton of soil a year. That's some of your most fertile soil is where you've got earthworms. You've got earthworms in your soil, you've got a fertile soil. If you don't have earthworms, you better be getting it correct. You got a problem. And we can, at our farm up at Guthrie, you can take the shovel and put it in the ground and just turn it over, and there's hundreds and hundreds of earthworms when you turn that soil over. Yeah. Sure. Yeah, you can. There's people that raises earthworms for that purpose. And you can do that. Once you get them started, you're fine. Yes, sir. They're a happy campers. You're feeding them good. And I've seen earthworms as big as my index finger in the past. Do what? Yeah, the hammerhead now is another story. The regular earthworms is what you want. Hammerhead worms has come in the last, I don't know how many years it's been, but they are evasive. Yep. And I'm afraid we're going to have a problem with them even more so later on down the road.
If we find a hammerhead.
Bring it to the extension office and yeah, and all the microbes and everything in the soil. Yeah, they can regenerate if they're cut in pieces. Yeah, you'll see them. There's bunches of them there. Bad, and they've got a head on them like a hammer. Like a hammerhead shark. You can't mistake them. That's for sure. All right, why do we need to know about soils? All right, plants grow in it. Troubleshoot plant problems by looking at the soil. Disease, antibiotic factors. Will water be easily given up to the plant? Are there any soil organisms at work? Does water soak in, run off, or stand on the surface? Drainage is very important in soils. Boy, have I seen some soils that you needed a $40 million yacht to get through it. That's how much water there was. All right, what is soil? Ideally, and there's no soil that's ideal. It's just like anything else in this world. There's nothing perfect. Soil is the same way. But ideally, you want about 25% air, 25% water, 45 to 48% minerals, 2 to 5% organic matter, but that can vary a whole lot. It just depends on what you're doing to maintain that soil, and then your soil organisms. That's ideal. And all those combined make your soil up. And if you're lacking any one of those, you've got a problem to start off with, period. All right, a teaspoon of soil contains between 100 million and 1 billion organisms. I said it's a living organism. Everybody doesn't think that soil's alive, but it is. That's what makes everything tick. And the 4 functions, there's decomposers that breaks down the materials. There's mutilus, which they get along with each other. They share. Then you've got your pathogens. You've got good pathogens, you've got bad pathogens. And it just depends on how healthy you keep your soil. And then the chemoautotropes, which is chemicals. So there's a whole lot going on in that soil. You just don't realize it. You ever have access to a microscope? That's where you can really see what's going on. All right. Psychographic regions of Tennessee. We're divided up into different regions in the state of Tennessee. All states are, but since we're master gardeners here in Montgomery County, I'll do the Tennessee one. They describe the land surfaces and the features. They're closely related to geology. Yes, I had to take geology. I took 3 years of geology in college because I majored in soil, plant and soil science. Slope and soils are related. Yes, I like land that's level as this floor right here, but we don't get that a lot. And believe me, I've seen some steep soils. All right, this is an example. This is Tennessee, west, middle, and east. The pink coloring, you'll see Montgomery County, and I didn't think to get my laser pointer, but Montgomery County's up at the top up there in that pink up there. And we're actually in region 122, according to this map. And this is the Highland Rim and Pennyroyal. And the Pennyroyal goes into Kentucky too. So we kind of share between state lines and states. And the Highland Rim's got a unique, each one of these regions has got unique soil types, and they're all named. I know the ones on our farm in Kentucky, they're Pembroke and Kreider soils is what they are. Some of the best of the best that you can get. And these are the USDA or United States Department of Agriculture divides these up and they name them. Where Nashville is, it's called the Nashville Basin. It's a bowl. It's what it looks like. You can look at a topography map and you can see it just like a bowl. That's what it is. That's why it flooded in 2010, because that was the natural floodplain for that. I don't care how old your floodplain is. It's not if it happens, it's when it happens. And where they build houses here in Montgomery County on floodplains, big mistake. Because one of these days it's going to flood if it hasn't already. And you know, years ago, there used to be a law that you couldn't build anything on a floodplain, but it's called greed for money now. All right, soil type or soil color. There's a book that you can buy. It's not really effectively for a master gardener. It's $1,200 for a book, but it's got every color of soil that exists in the world. And that's a key. You match it to those color keys that they've got. And that's how they classify the soil colors and everything. We've got it for plants too, for the color of the green plants or any color that's in plants. Don't make any difference. It's red, white, purple, polka dot. They've got a book that does that too, and that one's about $3,000. I've got one of those because I had to use it in plant genetics all the time when we were doing patent applications for descriptions. And this is an example of different colors of soil. Soil comes in all shapes and types all over the world. All right, now, come on. All right, somebody help me out. It does this at school.
Use that one.
Oh,
You're right. I don't know what it's.
I know.
No, below this line? So that's gonna.
Okay,
Is that?
now we're good. Yeah, Carl. I have no idea because there's Huntington soils in West Tennessee, and you know that as well as anything when you was doing your field trials too. I don't know. I don't understand that. Dixon's only one of many soils that we've got here in Tennessee. I don't know why they just picked one. And that's not I mean, it's common, but not that common though. I don't know. That's a good question. This was took in Hawaii 40 years ago. This is the soil about a mile from where our corn nurseries was. This is what the soil looks like. That's the iron that's in it. It's amazing when you see soils all over the world. And that's all volcanic origin. That's why it's got so much iron in it. Anything you plant in that soil, as long as you put water to it, it'll grow. No problem. I thought I'd throw that in. I found that one Sunday night and I said, I'm gonna put that one in there. All right. Soil texture means the amount of sand, silt, and clay. This is a soil texture triangle. The higher, when you get up to the point, the more clay there is in the soil. The lower you go, the more sand you've got in it. In between is a mixture of the clay and the sand, which is loam. And that's what you want. You want a loamy soil. That's your ideal soil, if you can get it. Now, I know a lot of you live in subdivisions and you've got a rock pile. I know. We call that cherty ground where it comes natural. But that was man-made chert right there. But you can correct that over time. So, but this just gives you the different colors represent the different soil textures that's on there. And I remember doing this in soils labs, trying to figure out what the texture of the soil is. And when I was in FFA in high school, in my junior year, I was on the national FFA soil judging team. We won the national FFA soil judging contest in Oklahoma City. That was one of the best moments of my life when we did that. And I've never forgotten it either. I've used it every day. But I had a good teacher too, which made a lot of difference. And like I said, soil texture is the amount of sand, silt, and clay. Sand is the biggest, loam is in between, and clay is the finest. And they've all got characteristics. Sand is coarse. Loam it'll crumble and then it'll come apart in your hand if the moisture's right. Clay, if it's got moisture in it, you crumble it in your fist. When you do this, it'll stay there. And then if you let it dry, it's brick hard. You don't never work your garden or any of your soil wet. You do, you'll pay for it the whole year. Sometimes longer than that. And this just explains coarse soils do not hold a lot of water. It filters through it fast. It dries fast. So you have to keep those watered or irrigated, whichever method you've got on watering. Now the soils in Hawaii, they had to be watered every other day because they dried so fast, because they were so porous. It was annoying when you get out there every morning and it'd stick to your boots and your shoes like Gorilla Glue. And then by noon at lunchtime, it didn't even look like it rained. So, but we had corn there though, over my head. But remember, coarse soils take a lot of water. And it's hard to make a sandy soil extremely wet. Yeah. Yeah. And it depends on where you're at in the world too. All right. Medium textured soils. Those are your ideal soils. They've got, we call it WHC, water holding capacity. They've got ideal water holding capacity. So if it gets dry, it'll hold water until the plant starts wilting. And when it starts wilting, that means it's needing some more water. But it will linger on though, it'll still survive. Now your clay soils, they're the ones that holds the most water, and too much water in clay soils are detrimental. But they do better in a drought year like the heat and the dry weather that we had this summer. And a lot of it depends on the genetics of the plant too, nowadays. All right, how do you do texture? This is what we used to learn when we was in high school to do texture. You take a sample of soil, you get the right amount of moisture in it, you put it with your index finger and your thumb, and you just push it, and it'll make a ribbon. It'll stay together. Sandy soil won't do that. Clay soil will do it in a heartbeat. Loam soil, it'll make a ribbon, but it'll start breaking apart because of the sand that's in there. That's keeping it loose. But that's how you do that. All right, soil structure. Well, this thing's got a mind of its own. All right, so what about soil structure? Drainage, plant penetration, oxygen penetration. These are some of the examples of what soils can look like. And an example, what's that? All right, the platy that's up in the upper right-hand corner. That's where water has run over the soil over a period of time. Once it quits and then it dries out, it makes those kind of rectangular shapes. And when they dry, you can actually pick them up. All these you can pick up when it's dry. But that's just the difference. Prismatic or soils were, oh, where's there a good example of those? New Zealand would be a good example of those. Those are common over there in the sheep where they have a lot of sheep. But that's where the water currents creates those columns of soil. It's actually silt's what it is. And it's pretty neat. You get some real pretty ones doing that, but they're all there for a purpose. And plant penetration, single grain or granular on the left side, no problem. Roots can penetrate that. But when you start getting into your blocky, your prismatic, your massive, and your platy, you start having trouble getting root penetration. And once the roots find a hard spot, they're not going to grow down, they're going to grow horizontal. That's called hard pan. All right, pore spaces. That's the space in between the soil particles. Very important. The smaller particles, the smaller the pore spaces, the less air you have between those soil particles. Water moves very slow when those particles are real close together. And there's also less air present, which is not conducive for plant growth. Your plants is going to look up at you and they're going to say, I'm sick. That's the reason. No air and the water's moving through real slow. All right, how do we improve soils? You can do it by drainage, moisture, fertility, soil health, and if you've got problems, you got to correct them. And soil tells the plant what's the matter with it. It's just like going to the doctor. Same principle. And you can see down here on the bottom of this chart here, you got sand, loamy sand, sandy loam, so on. Well, the farther to the right you go, the better the soil or the water holding capacity. And the more available water you got. Field capacity means how much that soil can actually hold total. And when you've got excess, it just runs off. And that's what you don't want. You don't want it to run off. You want to try to keep that water in that soil where it can be used for the plant for future use when it needs it, especially like the heat and dry weather that we had this year. Compacted soil. Very easily done in a garden. Farmers do it every day. When you've got a compacted soil, water can't penetrate it. It just stays on top. You don't have no pore space either. It's so packed together, so tight, the air can't even move in it. So you have to break that up, or you have to use cover crops or something that'll take care of that. And there is certain plants that can break that compacted soil up. And there's also a couple of nutrients that you can use too to do that too. All right, soil profile. Soil profile is divided up into different regions. And it goes O, A, B, C, and D. Usually I'll only go to C. But O is your top couple of inches of soil. That's your darkest colored soil. That's where all your organic matter is. And it's usually a dark brown is what it is here. And when you get up in the northern part of the United States or in areas where the glaciers are, that soil will be solid black because they're extremely high in organic matter in those soils. We call them muck soils because they hold water like crazy. Michigan is one of the states that's got muck soils. That's why they grow good cranberries, because it holds water. And cranberries likes water. It's almost like raising rice. In Arkansas, they've got soils down there that doesn't drain very good, but they drain good enough to raise rice because they flood the rice fields. Rice grows in water about 6 to 12 inches deep its whole life. And then they cut the water off of it, and then they go in there with combines and harvest it in the mud. But they've got special machines that can go through that without any problem. Topsoil is called your A horizon. That's your main layer of soil that you work in the garden. That's what you rototill, or that's what you plow under. And it's got all your microbes and everything in it. Same way with your O horizon. Your B horizon, it starts changing color. It's usually a yellow to a yellowish orange. If you've got a lot of iron in your soil, it's going to have that more orangey red look than what the yellow soil or subsoil is. And you can work, when you rototill, if you can rototill deep enough, you can bring up some of that subsoil and mix it with your A horizon or your topsoil. That's not going to hurt anything. That's good, you doing that, because it brings some fresh material up into the plow layer. We call it the plow layer. They don't plow no more, hardly. Everything's no-tilled now. And I even no-till in the garden too. So, and then C horizon is weathered bedrock. That's rock that has been weathered by Mother Nature at one point in time. That's where your soil originates from. And it's been weathered over thousands of years. Your D horizon is nothing but solid bedrock. That's all it is, until Mother Nature breaks it apart. Freezing and thawing is how it does that. Or the shifting of the tectonic plates in the earth. Any of that causes those rocks to come apart. Remember, it takes 7,000 years to make an inch of topsoil.
So how?
That depends on where you're at. Our topsoil at our farm at Guthrie, Kentucky is 7.5 feet deep. Our subsoil is just as bright red as it can be, and it's anywhere from 8 to 14 feet deep. We've got real deep soils up there. There is soils in West Tennessee that's like that too. And some of them down in the southern part of Middle Tennessee is like that too. So depends on where you're at. Now, you go overseas, go to South America or Africa, there's some soils that's got topsoil in it that's 20, 25 feet deep. And they're real dark in color. Especially down in Mato Grosso in the soybean area in Brazil. Those soils are about 28 feet deep, topsoils. They used to be rainforest. Of course, they ruined our ecosystem doing that. But that's how deep those soils are. And a lot of those soils, they're still raising crops there that they've never fertilized in 40 years. That's how fertile they are. But one of these days, they're going to have to change that because they're depleting the soils big time on nutrients. But this soil profile is pretty neat. And we did this in land judging, soil judging. They dug a hole in the ground and we could see all those horizons. And we had to identify them and everything. We had to know the texture. We had to know the water holding capacity. We had to figure all that and put it on a card that we had. So Carl probably remembers some of that. Oh, come on, Carl, don't be modest. I know, yeah, but you gotta have hay for the cattle too. All right, we've done went through this. My brother and I had cattle too. We had 200 Hereford and we crossed them with an Angus bull, and then we had 100 head of milk cows, Holsteins. We had 10 cows that give 33 gallons of milk at a milk. Yep, a lot of milk. Those are show cows. All right, come on. All right, soil horizons, water infiltration. Horizons have different properties. Like I said, some may retard water flow, which I've already mentioned. And then watch out for the builder's horizon. All of you people that's got new houses or newer houses, you know what I'm talking about. And builders are bad about that. They'll just find something just to throw in there. They don't put good soil back. Usually if they find a rock pile, that's ideal for them. So you have to create new soil amendments and so on. We're blessed at our place. We were used to working with rocks and everything years ago. We bought that place. There's not a rock on that farm. Nowhere. All right. Whoops. This thing's got Carla, you jinxed this thing for me. Well, I got to get it to go backwards. Come on. We're not there yet. A little difficulty. All right, here we go. All right, to check your drainage in your soil, you need to do this 24 hours beforehand. Dig a hole about 12 inches deep. Pour you a bucket of water in there. Go back the next morning and see what's left in the hole. If you don't see water in that hole, your drainage is fine. If you see water still in that hole, you've got a drainage problem. Either you've got a hard pan where the water can't soak down, or you got a bunch of fill that's in there like rocks and stuff. But you can fix that problem. But you got it. You're not going to do it in a year. It's going to take time to do that over a period of years, but it can be done. I've done it before. And I get it going the right way again. Come on. That's what I'm doing. I'm on the air now. Well, I did, and it wasn't working like I wanted it to. All right. Soils have moisture characteristics. This is important for runoff and plant growth. And you noticed the blue is the water. And in between the reddish brown is the soil particles. Well, that blue is pore space, like I was talking about. You notice down here at the bottom where you've got different pore space equivalents. The big picture right there, that gives you an idea where the roots go into the pore spaces. They find the water and find the nutrients. Remember, when those Pore spaces close up that restricts both plant growth and the runoff of water. Yes, ma'am.
Shrub, looks like. Do them twice.
Twice as big.
So, if I do this,
Well, normally what you do is try to get your hole dug. I know you're gonna use a little more elbow grease doing that, but get your hole dug, put some soil amendments in there like peat moss or pine fines like fine pine bark, stuff like that. Put in the bottom of that hole before you put the shrub in. And when you get a shrub, whether it's in a pot or whatever, knock it out of the pot. If it doesn't have a cover around it, if it does, you take that cover off because it's going to restrict the root growth. And I take a knife and I actually just go through and cut the root ball because that makes it make new roots real quick. It doesn't have to struggle. So new root hairs, they'll show up in about 72 hours. And then there'll be little fine, white, fuzzy looking little spaghetti is what it looks like. And when they start growing, then that that plant's starting to grow again. So it can get the nutrients and the water and everything that it needs.
do that.
Yes, yes, yep, yep, yep.
One, let the roots grow out. So
Yeah.
You have a whole two plant. It's that hard dirt.
It's not gonna go nowhere. It's just gonna, all those roots that do, they'll just ball up themselves and tie themselves in a knot, is what they'll do. And they won't last. If you'd have a hard winter, real below zero temperatures, that plant would probably not make it during the next spring. It doing that. Yes, 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 yes. I've killed a many a plant in my time, believe me. I've been to the school of hard knocks. All right, the next part of this is soil fertility. This is one of my favorites. And believe me, boy, we had fun when we was at Cargill trying to figure out soil fertility sometimes. Especially on some of the research plots and everything that we had to deal with. Of course, the terms and definitions, which I call vocabulary to my students. First thing you do is talk about the terminology that you're going to use. All right, an essential nutrient is an element necessary for plant growth and reproduction. An example, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, that's called N, P, and K for short. Deficiency, that's a plant condition where it doesn't have or it needs that nutrient. It's starving it. Just like if we wasn't getting any food, we're starving for the food and it's got nutrients in it that we need to function. Plants the same way. It's not available. A symptom is a visual sign. You can actually see it with the naked eye. And when you as master gardeners get familiar with all this, and I know it's mind-boggling right now, but as you use it every day, you can tell a symptom of a plant when it's sick without any problem in a heartbeat. I've got farmers that brings plants all summer long, corn plants, soybean plants. I had one bring some raspberry plants. He never had put iron on the ground, and I knew exactly what was the matter with those raspberries when he brought the plants. It was horrible. And this is part of the definitions. All right, fertilizer. It can be natural, it can be manufactured, or it can be processed material or a mixture of any of the above. And it can come in dry, liquid, or gaseous, but you won't be doing gaseous. That's too dangerous. But the dry and the liquid you will. Probably more like Miracle-Gro or something, or the generic version of Miracle-Gro. Is probably what you'll use more than anything. All right, fertilizer terms. Each package of fertilizer by federal law has to have an analysis on it. It's the percentage of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Those are the three major elements, or N, P, and K. They have got to be on there, and they're in a percentage. And they've got to be at least that percentage that it says on the bag or more. If it's less than that, the company that makes it and they get caught, they're going to be fined big time because of that. And there's a brand, all of them's got brands. I couldn't even name all of them. There's so many of them anymore. And that's like a trademark or a logo that the company produces. Miracle-Gro would be a trademark or a trade logo. Expert would be the generic version of Miracle-Gro, by the way. Same thing, just put in a different box with a different name on it, but it's Miracle-Gro actually. All right, a complete fertilizer has got all three elements listed on the bag. If it does not have N, P, and K listed on that bag, it is not a complete fertilizer. It's called an incomplete fertilizer. There's one nutrient missing, and you can buy it like that. You can go to your mass retail chains and you can buy incomplete fertilizers. You may not need all three elements. You only may need two of those. So it just, and it depends, and I'll get into soil testing later. All right, this is an example. This is a turf fertilizer picture that I found. It's got 16-4-8. Is that a complete or incomplete fertilizer? Yeah, it's got all three elements. It's 16% nitrogen, 4% phosphorus, and 8% potassium. And then it's got other elements, your secondary elements like sulfur. And then they've got chlorine listed. That's coming from the potash, is where that's coming from. Because that's muriate of potash, and it's got chlorine in it. But they're finding out from research from not long ago that plants do use chlorine, believe it or not. They claimed it used to be detrimental, but now they've changed their opinions on that. So chlorine is one of the elements that's recommended.
How do they use chlorine?
Hmm.
How do they use chlorine?
It's attached, potash is mined out of the earth. Cargill had two mines, one in Utah and one in Ukraine. And that's just natural. Mother Nature made it with chlorine. It's called muriate of potash, is really what it is. And the muriate is where the chlorine's at. And it just comes, it's real soluble in water. It's just a natural element. It's amazing seeing them mine that potash underground. It scares me to death when you go underground. So I wonder if the earth is going to cave in on us.
So question, so
Yes,
the
sir.
chlorine that the city puts in the water isn't so bad after all?
That chlorine is different than this chlorine. Yeah, that chlorine that the city uses is a whole lot stronger, more concentrated.
So if we can avoid using that, we should.
Yeah, I would. And they're specialty fertilizers. They've got a fertilizer for any plant that exists. Used to, we didn't have that, but now we do. Well, it's a marketing tool. They get filthy rich, trust me. Their markup on that stuff's about 85% profit. Yeah. some of the Miracle Grow or experts got, the generic version of Miracle Grow, it'll do just as good.
Look at compare the label, so if you look at a bag of 10, 10, 10, and you look at one of these bags, compare and see what that has.
Yeah. Look at your active ingredients. Most consumers don't look at the active ingredients on anything on a bag, because they can be the same thing with two different brands, and one of them may be priced 50% higher. Identically the same thing. That's what Expert is. Expert is the generic version of Miracle Grow. It's identically the same as Miracle Grow. Same analysis, same primary, secondary, and micronutrients. Identical. But a cheaper price. And it does the same job. So you've got to look at the label. That's what gets me about the consumer. And no offense to anybody in here, but the consumer is one of the dumbest people when it comes. Cereal boxes, same way in the grocery store. You look at your cereal boxes, you're buying less and paying more because they did that about 15 years ago. And they're doing it each time that they bring in a new lot. They're putting less and less in the containers.
Make a difference in how it, like, senses it, because, like, I'm saying, like, does it break down more or less?
No. No, the nutrients are the same. Nothing changes on it, just the percentage, the amount that's in the, you know, whatever analysis it is. But functioning, no, they're the same. All right, chemical elements essential to plant growth. All right, the non-mineral, these come out of the air. These are Mother Nature's. We got carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. All four of those are Mother Nature's. We don't make those. And then the minerals from the soil, Mother Nature makes, for the most part. Primary elements are your most important ones. You got three of them: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, or are also called N, P, and K. Now, in some crops, you have to worry about the secondary and the micronutrients, especially in vegetables or fruit production. Those are very important. And your secondary is calcium, magnesium, sulfur. Magnesium is the core of the chlorophyll molecule. If you don't have magnesium, you don't have chlorophyll. And that's one thing that gets under my skin with some of these liquid fertilizers, or these that you can put in water and make a liquid fertilizer. They do not put magnesium in their formulation. Then here you come up with a magnesium deficiency. And I'll show you a picture of some corn this year that was caused from that. So I had to go buy Epsom salts, which is magnesium sulfate, to correct that. Your micronutrients are just very small, minute quantities. It don't take very much. Too much can be detrimental. It's not enough. And iron, boron, manganese, copper, zinc, molybdenum, chlorine, and now they've added nickel, which is a heavy metal. And they condoned heavy metals years ago, but they're finding out that nickel plays an important part in amino acid metabolism. I'll just say it like that. I won't get into the molecular part. However, boron, I'll give you an example. Years ago, when my brother and I raised cabbage in Nashville in Davidson County, we raised 30 acres of cabbage one year. Didn't have no place to sell it. But we had somebody in Nashville, Formosa Foods, that found out about us. And he got tired of buying cabbage in West Tennessee that was full of worms. I just told him, I said, well, that's extra protein. You shouldn't charge for that. But anyway, when he bought a ton truckload of our cabbage, when he cut it in half, it was pearl white. There wasn't no flaws in it. What he was getting out of West Tennessee had a black spot in the center of it about big as my fist in that head. And he didn't know what was the matter. I said, well, I'll tell you what's the matter. It's a micronutrient deficiency in West Tennessee. And that soil, those soils in West Tennessee, most of them has got that kind of sandy, loamy type soil. So the nutrients don't stay there as long as they would in our silt loams here in Middle Tennessee. So he talked to the farmer. He dropped him. He said he didn't want no more of his cabbage. So he started buying from us. So we raised cabbage for him for 20 years. Never had a problem, boron. No black spots big as your fist or anything. So vegetables is very peculiar about the micronutrients, the ones that's in real small quantities. Peaches are the same way. Apples are the same way. Raspberries, any of those kite fruits, citrus is the same way. All of those. So they can play a role. A lot of your agronomic crops, it's not so sensitive like these other crops are. But I've seen molybdenum deficiency. Well, I've seen zinc in corn too. But that has to do with pH, and we'll get into that later. All right, profits can fall. Plant growth can fall. If any of these nutrients are missing that's holding up this table, it will affect your yield, it will affect your quality and your quantity. Just remember that. You got to keep that platform perfect with the nutrients. And each one of those plays a role. All right, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen are needed for plant processes, photosynthesis, respiration. 95% of the weight of plants comes from photosynthesis. All right, nitrogen. We're almost to our break. Nitrogen is the one that gives it its dark green color, and it also aids in seed and fruit development. But the thing of it is nitrogen, it cannot use the atmospheric nitrogen that we've got in our atmosphere, which is 80%. We have to feed that naturally to them, either through synthetic fertilizers or organic fertilizers or whatever. So they have to be combined with the other elements to make it do that. And it increases protein and yield. Protein is one of the big ones. And it also gives that plant real rapid growth. The warm nights that we had this summer with extreme heat in the daytime, that plant, if you give it the nitrogen that it needs, it's not uncommon for a plant to grow 6 to 8, 10 inches a night. That's nothing unusual, especially when you got the temperatures to do it with.
What about when?
Yeah, there's nitrogen in rainfall. The more lightning you have, the more nitrogen you're going to have because you got an electrical forcer that's creating it. So that's good. I know nobody likes a lot of lightning, but severe lightning storms, it's got a lot of nitrogen in the rainfall. So that kind of helps neutralize it. All right, phosphorus is important in germinating seedlings, and it also contributes to early maturing crops. When we used to raise seed corn, if we had a parent or a parental that was behind in growth, we would add phosphorus and potassium to the side of the row, and we could make that plant 7 days earlier. It would catch up. There's tricks. There's a lot of tricks using fertilizer elements to plant growth. That was one of them that we did. And the plant will tell you too, if your deficient in it too, because it turns a reddish purple color most of the time, unless it's a genetic trait. All right, potassium makes better seed. It also makes a planter. It also induces stalk and root strength. So if you've got a plant, or if you've got a vegetable variety or a fruit or something that's kind of little weak on roots or stalks, you can add some more potassium and it'll work wonders for you. And it also takes water. Water intake's also controlled by potassium too. All right, the secondary nutrients. Calcium is used to control the pH of the soil also. But it also speeds up decay in organic matter. The microbes love calcium. And it stimulates the formation of nitrates. Nitrates the plant can use. Nitrites the plant cannot use. They're deadly. And when the soil breaks down in the nitrogen cycle for the plant to use it, it's got to go through 3 different stages before it's available. The nitrates is the finished product. That's what the plants can use. Very water soluble, very movable. So if you get a big rainstorm of 6 inches or something, well, you better go back and you better put some more nitrogen on, because you probably haven't got any left. Because it disintegrated in the water, the enormous amount of water that happened. And it promotes root and leaf growth. And it also controls pH. And we'll get into that later. Of course, there's deficiency symptoms. I'm not going to go through those. The leaves are crinkled, they're small. The plant just looks sick. Looks like it's had diarrhea for about 3 weeks. That's what it looks like. Like I said, the wrinkling on the older leaves, dead stem tips, they brown. Yes, house plants are the same way. Yep, just on a smaller scale. Yep. All right, magnesium, like I said, is the core of the chlorophyll molecule. It absorbs phosphorus. And then it also aids in the formation of fats and oils. And it's also important in the plant enzyme system. This is one of the main ones. Mg is a chemical symbol for it. Just remember, it's the core of the chlorophyll molecule. Without chlorophyll, we have nothing. You got interveinal chlorosis. In other words, you'll see the vein of the leaf, and then you'll see the vein in between the veins. You'll see that yellowish, greenish looking color. And I've got a picture of that. There's the corn right there this year. That was caused from not having magnesium in liquid fertilizer. That's potatoes on the right side. That's what it does. It kills the tissue. Eventually, that corn plant would turn white. There wouldn't be no chlorophyll in it at all. And it'd die. It'd turn brown, and that'd be the end of it. But I fixed that. I put magnesium sulfate on Epsom salts. Same thing, you soak your feet in and everything. Took it about 3 weeks to correct it, but it was fine. All right, sulfur is used in stimulates seed production. It affects the protein and crop quality. It also affects the amino acid content of the plant too. And it's also a nodulation part of legumes that puts nitrogen back in the soil from Mother Nature. sulfur is getting to be a critical element nowadays, especially with the high yields that we're producing. It's taking more out than we can put in, so we have to justify that. Used to not be like that. And our climate's changed too over the years. So that doesn't help. You've got a lot of heat. It tends to destroy the sulfur in the soil. Iron. It's essential for chlorophyll production. It mixes oxygen with the other elements. All right, you get a mottling intervalal chlorosis just like you saw on that corn plant. Just a little bit more severe. And it's stunted growth. Iron really stunts a plant in growth. Copper. It stunts growth. No, not enough. Not enough. Copper's another one. Used to, we didn't even think about copper, but nowadays we're having to watch copper too. Its functions. It uses iron. Iron and copper works hand in hand. There's a deficiency of one, there'll be a deficiency of the other one, and it knows it. Helps in respiration. Young leaves are small, and when they wilt, they stay wilted. It's just like drought stress. And you got multiple buds at a stem tip. In other words, instead of having one bud at the apical tip of a growing stem, you've got a whole bunch of little ones in that cluster. Put your mind like a bract of a flower is what it is. And that's really getting severe when it does that. Okay, break time. I knew I was looking for zinc somewhere. I knew it was on. All right, let's take a. I think I'm doing good. I figured an hour and 15 minutes and I'm right on it. All right, anybody got any questions? Fire away. Yes, ma'am. Mhm. Have it tested, but it's not cheap. Yeah. Usually when you got compost, generally you're pretty good on your nutrients. Compost. You got everything in there. You know, whatever you throw in there has usually got nutrients in with it too. Generally you'll be fine on that. I remember I used to use compost years ago. But everything like
I know people like.
Yeah. But it, you know, they have
Yeah, let's specify on that. We do, where we raise hydroponic back. We got done with that, we leave black. Stuff and float it. We just don't go further. And we put corners in. And totally just soak. Stuff, and you just put black. Freeze. Could be about a week later. We start getting. We're gonna have that one high school. We're gonna be. Tell them. So all the eggs stuck there and it's all morning. Find a way. We saw we talk to the kids. So I got to check.
a question.
Yeah.
So I got tomatoes. And then you just. So I know, I.
Later spring. No.
Yeah, we were supposed to.
No.
Like the songs. One part.
Okay, sorry about that, that we got kind of muffled. We are on break, so there's a lot of conversation going on in the room. We're getting ready to start again, though. No problem with this. No, it's fine. It's just they can't do that. I knew how to put it together.
I've got. Started. I've got 6 more slides. I want to get done on. I gotta get up at 3 a.m. and. Things to do before we get ready to go to school. cats to feed, greenhouse, all that good stuff. But when we hit the school doors, we're ready to rock and roll with students. And the school board's gonna be there tomorrow. Gonna be in our class. Oh, don't worry, mine will be razzed dazzled. They won't have no idea. Oh. I'm talking about Crystal 9, Q4. Genetic to genetic stuff. Okay. Zinc is another micronutrient. And zinc is also controlled by pH too, or the availability of it. Get all these now. All right, plant metabolism, its functions, it helps growth hormones, reproduction, that's including seed production. And the deficiency symptoms, retarded growth between the nodes of the plant. They're rosetted. In other words, they're deformed is what they are. They look weird. You ever see one, you'll never forget it. And they're real thick and small. It's like the cuticle of a skin when it's exposed and it gets real hard. You have to take hand lotion or something to moisten it. That's what the retarded growth is on these plants like that when they've got zinc deficiency. And there's also spots between the veins of the plant. And the veins of the leaf are not green. They are very discolored, like a grayish brown looking color if it's real severe. One of these days might be able to have you come out to our farm and I can show you deficiencies. Peaches and apples. Yeah, we sell those. We have a peach crop, we'll sell $100,000 of peaches off of an acre. Our peaches is smallest we raise is baseball size, the biggest is softball size. You better bring a bib because the juice will just go all over your clothes. We had a crop this year. Probably it had been one of the earliest crops we'd ever harvested. But Mother Nature didn't want to cooperate. The first freeze that we had after they set, they were big as my thumb. This was in March. You don't have peaches here in March. And then each time that we'd get below freezing temperatures, it would destroy, which is fine with me because you got to thin them to make them size. I was a happy camper every time it done it. But when it done it the last time, it destroyed the rest of them that should have been there. But we've been picking peaches Memorial Day, a month early, if we'd had a crop. Now our apples, we've done harvested the apples. One of the biggest apple crops we've ever seen. It actually, the top limbs of the tree was touching the ground. It's a wonder it didn't break them, but it didn't. Oh, we've done field trips in the past. Carla probably remembers a bunch of them. Yep. And the orchard is where you can walk down it. I mow the roads in between the trees. So it can rain 6 inches one day and you can go in there the same day and walk on it without any problem. I did that on purpose. So we keep sod in there, hold the soil for one thing, but it also keeps the weeds down too. But the orchard's been set 13 years. The peach trees are standard trees. The apple trees are dwarf trees. They're not much taller than I am. So there's a trick to raising dwarf apple trees. You got to know your root stocks and everything to use, but they do fine down here. These are all from Purdue University. Well, Purdue and Rutgers University. They're disease resistant, so you don't have to hardly spray them. That's the reason I got them. Took Purdue 30 years to develop those. But they are nice. They're replacements for the old applesauce apple, Lodi, summer apple. And then I've got the replacements for the Golden Delicious and Red Delicious and the Gala. And I just got a new one last year that is going to replace Honeycrisp. Honeycrisp is hard to raise down here because of the heat. Honeycrisp does not like hot weather. It was bred for the Pacific Northwest in the states of Washington and Oregon. And it's hard to get it to color down here because of the heat like this year. This one here doesn't care. I'm not at liberty to say because I got the trees and I can't say yet because it's not officially released. I know the plant breeder at Washington State developed it, so. Yeah, that one's gonna do good. From what I've seen of it, that's gonna be a winner down in Tennessee and Kentucky. We need one that'll replace Honeycrisp. Most of your Honeycrisp comes out of the state of Washington anyway. And it tastes better than Gala too. So if you can get something better than Gala and it colors better than what Honeycrisp is, you got some. Oh, all those from Purdue University are resistant to apple cedar rust. They were selected for that, specifically one of the diseases that they were having problems. I know. And the humid weather that we have is just a breeding ground for cedar apple rust. For matter of fact, any other disease, it doesn't make any difference what disease it is. We're a breeding ground for all that stuff. One of the big ones that's affecting the farmers in the agronomic crops, especially field corn, but it also is affecting the vegetable grower too of sweet corn. We've got a disease called tar spot. And it'll annihilate a crop in about 2 weeks. We were the first, and I'm sorry to say, I was the first in Kentucky to have it confirmed in my corn breeding nursery 2 years ago. I spotted it and give it to the county agent, and I said, send this to Princeton. I said, I want to confirm it to make sure it's what I think it is, a cedar or tar spot. 24 hours later, it was tar spot. Plant pathologist was at my front door the next morning. So we had a long discussion about that. So I can reproduce it now. I've got the technique down. They've been having trouble reproducing it in the lab, but I've got it where I can do that now. I'm screening stuff now for tar spot. But sweet corn, you just look at it and it's susceptible to diseases. It just doesn't have the stature or to work with diseases and everything. It's just one of those plants that it's just puny. And so the plant breeders got a lot ahead of them to get that straightened out. And they're going to have to use corn that's coming from South America and Thailand in order to correct that problem. So that's what I'm using in field corn. Do what? No, there's some that's got the BT, but other than that, Carl, that's about it. Yeah, they haven't worked sweet corn like they have field corn. So that's something we're gonna have to look at, and the fertility is gonna be another important thing with tar spot too, because they're finding out that fertility plays a role in that now. What little research we've got on it too. So it's gonna be interesting to see what happens. Of course, there's a good old boron, like I was talking about with the cabbage. The main thing you'll see in your brassica crops like broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, kale, collards like that, you'll see a black spot inside of that stem where it's deficient. You can't see it from the outside, but you can see it from the inside. And manganese, Most of these has to do with plant metabolism, all of them do, but and you still got that chlorosis in between the veins. That's where most of it shows up. And if it's bad enough, it'll kill the plant. And I've seen a lot of this in the past. Molybdenum, that was one of the big things back in the late 60s. They found out molybdenum was a critical element for soybeans and green beans, snap beans in the garden. They had no idea that it was until they did some studies on it, because they started seeing something wrong with the seed quality and everything, and they found out that that's what it was molybdenum. We call it moly for short. Is what we call it. And it also affects small grains too. I don't know if Carl's ever run into that problem in his career with small grains, but I've seen it more than once in small grains. And of course, chlorines come back. Some plant processes, especially in enzymes and amino acids. And then nickel. That's the one that's recent. That's considered a heavy metal, but they're finding out that it also, urea is a form of nitrogen. It's a synthetic form. And they're finding out that with nickel, the plant can utilize urea with the presence of nickel in the soil. I'd have never thought that. But it's true, and it's narcotic lesions is what it is that shows up. All right, 4 phases of soil management. This is where it gets fun. Analyzing your soil. One of the big ones. And then using soil conditioners. That can be pine fines. That can be rotted compost. It can be rotted manure. One of my favorites is mushroom compost, but it's hard to get and it's not cheap, but it is nice to have. And then using specific fertilizers. You can make a fertilizer any analysis you want nowadays. You can create it. Before we couldn't do that, but we can now. And then adding general fertilizers like 10-10-10 or 6-12-12. Those are called general fertilizers. They've been around for years and years. I remember those when I was growing up. So, and then they're still made, they're still used, and they're still sold. But analyzing your soil is one of your most important things. This is one of my pet peeves right here, is analyzing your soil. All right, don't guess soil test. Guessing's not good because that could be detrimental to you and the plants. The soil testing now is $25 per sample, $15 for the test, and $10 for the postage to get it to the soils lab in Nashville, out at Ellington. And the nutrient test provides the following. Provides a soil pH. It provides a buffer pH, which is a water test that they use. That determines from the soil pH how much lime you've got to put on that soil. And then it also has PK, which is phosphorus, potassium, calcium, magnesium, zinc, manganese, iron, sodium, and boron. They do not do nitrogen because it's mobile. They give a recommendation for it depending on what the crop is. But a true recommendation they do not give, because that can vary from soil to soil. And this is the time of year to do it, people. You're not that busy. I can say that and I know I'm lying. I'm supposed to be retired and look at what I'm doing.
When you go like me. Here's
Yes.
what you do.
Yes.
And did it.
And if you don't understand it, give Carla a call. And I can give you my cell phone number and you can tell me over the phone, take a picture of it. I can tell you right there, wherever I'm at. If I'm in the classroom, that's fine. I'll narrate a soil test. Then let the students just look at me like I'm dumb. But I've done that before.
You have a specific prompt, they will give you pretty clear record.
Yeah, they will. You can get up to 4 recommendations, right, Carla?
Yeah.
Yeah, you should have, it should be in your booklet, or she's got soil test boxes and sheets too. But you can go up to 4 different crops with the same soil sample. The sample is only as good as the person that takes it. So don't screw it up. Because if you do, you're not gonna have the results that you need. I test every year. We've got our farm on 1/4 acre grids. And I take twice as many samples as what's recommended. Because I want to get that those soil samples mixed up in a good composite where I know I've got a good sample to deal with. I keep a backup sample of the one that you give Carla. The reason for that is I've had soil samples lost in the lab. So keep a duplicate soil sample until you get the results of one that you sent. Then you can do whatever you want to with it. I learned that the hard way. I had 50 samples and I had to go back out there and do them all over again because I didn't have a backup. I learned my lesson.
Tilling a new acre this year.
Mhm. I do about 25 to get a good composite. And make sure you don't, if you've got an area that's different than the rest of your area that you're sampling, you sample that separate. Do not, whatever you do, mix that with your regular soil sample that you're wanting, because that's going to throw everything off. It won't come out true. Always do that. Anything that's different, sample it separate. Always. And mix it up in a bucket. And you mix it up good. Do not, and I repeat, do not sample that soil wet, because the soil lab will not take it. You've got you can take a sample of soil, take your fist and press it. And when you undo your hand, if it starts coming apart, it's okay. But if you press it together and it stays together, it's too wet. And if it is a little bit what we call heavy and moisture, put it on some newspaper or something and let it dry naturally. Don't put heat to it. They're going to do that in the lab after it's dry, because they're going to put that thing in an oven and they're going to dry it to the max where there's no moisture in it at all. But for heaven's sakes, do not submit a soil sample that is wet, because Carla's going to give it back to you. Yeah. They normally put that in containers and they usually take them somewhere, is what they do. The last time I was in the soil lab,
Then testing or run through.
you see, they don't know if there's pathogens in there. They don't know what's in the soil. It could have cyst nematodes in it too. it's almost viable. Just put it in place there. Because there's too many unknowns.
So can a soil test, so it won't tell you if there's a disease in your soil?
No, you'd have to have that checked by a pathologist. You had the sample, you could give him or her the sample or a part of the sample, and they could look under it under the microscope.
Not a-
No, not necessarily. You can, if it's soil borne, it'll be in the soil. Normally it comes out of soil. I've seen water. Yeah, but if you don't have anything left of the plant. Believe me, I've seen some pretty good soil samples in my lifetime. It's been wild.
$10 to tip off here, you can start
$10 a sample. Mm-hmm.
One box.
put 3 boxes in another.
All right. The best time, if your soil needs lime, the best time to put it on is now. Because it generally takes, rule of thumb, and it depends on what kind of lime you use, how fine it is. The finer it is, the faster it reacts. But it usually takes, rule of thumb, 6 months for it to react. So if you put it on now in September, you got October, November, December, January, February, you won't see it start reacting until that soil starts warming up in February here. You just don't go out there and put lime on right quick because it's not going to react that quick. So remember that. Fall is your best time to correct your soil pH. You can do it in the spring, but you're not going to get the results as well as you would putting it on in the fall. And normally you're pretty much getting done with the season and everything. So you've got more time to do your maintenance on your soil than what you would in the spring. You're going to get anxious out there and go out there and you're going to work that soil wet. I know what you're going to do. And then you're going to be fussing all summer long. Well, I ain't got nothing growing right. I hear farmers say that all the time. I said, well, if you hadn't been in the field when it was wet, you wouldn't have that problem. I learned my lesson 50 years ago. Trust me. And remember, do not sample it wet. Do not work your garden wet. Because it'll be the same thing. That soil structure will be the worst thing you ever seen. It'll be a nightmare the whole growing season. All right, how often you do it, that depends on the situation. Normally your lawns and your gardens, your ornamental beds, as long as you don't see a problem, you can do it about every 5 years. But if you see a problem, you better test it every year until you get that problem corrected. Because the longer you let that problem go, the harder it is going to be to correct it. So remember that. High value crops, like vegetables, if you're raising them to sell or whatever, you test every year. Because they eat the fertilizer. Mhm.
You have raised beds in the ground. So,
Now, raised beds, you could probably test it every other year. Or as long as you don't have a problem, You're fine. Yeah,
Media.
yeah, it's not a soil test, it's a media. Mhm. It's a whole lot more. They've got to go some extra steps, that's why it's higher. Yep, variously. Yeah. Yeah, I forgot about the media test. And the media test is way different than what a regular soil test is. Because the media reacts different to nutrients, to lime requirements and everything. It's totally different than what soil is. Media is not forgiving like the soil is. You've got Mother Nature to deal with the forgiveness. In media, you don't. That's why you have to be so careful when you're using that in the greenhouses and everything, because all you have to do is make one mistake and it could cost you the whole thing.
So what most trees?
Yeah, potting mix. Yeah, you can mix it with soil. It's good that you do. Yeah. Because you've got the soil, you've got the natural soil in there as a buffer to do the corrections that it needs. If you make a mistake, soil will back you up on that.
Well, you know, when you go to the garden, that, I'm not, when you see these guys and have these, lack of better word, one with mulching. Is that dirt, is the local dirt, and you buy that, it's still.
Not necessarily.
So it's best to ask them where they.
Yep, I would.
Factor.
No, no. Green. I know I don't supposed to mention businesses, but there is one guy up at Elkton, Kentucky. Well, he's up at Fairview now because he moved his facility. Richard, I can't think of his last name, but he runs Deerfield Supplies at Elkton, Kentucky. I mean, Elkton or Fairview. I think it's Fairview now. He is very honest. I've dealt with him for 20-some years. And he gets topsoil. And I mean, when he says it's good, it's good. He's not lying. And he knows his products too. He sells media and everything. He sells the whole thing, fertilizer, bag where you can turn it into liquid fertilizer and all that. And he's got compost, all that stuff. He's got a menagerie.
Yeah.
I think he's gonna try to get it for next year because everybody's been worrying him to death.
Yeah.
Joanne's greenhouses right above our farm at Guthrie, she was selling mushroom compost this year in bags. It come out of Pennsylvania is where it come from. I know exactly where it come from because where my son was managing a seed collection 2-3 years ago, it was right down the road where he was at. Is where the mushroom farm was. Mushroom compost is nice if you can get it. It's not cheap, but it's very well worth the price though. I wouldn't take nothing. Matter of fact, I've got 15, 20 bags of it sitting on the bench at home now that I was using. I'm gonna put those in the greenhouse, put them underneath the bench. Horse manure, straw. It's all decomposed after growing the mushroom crop. That's what's left after they get done growing the mushrooms. It's real, fragile. I mean, it just comes apart in your hands. It's just so easy to work. And it's nutrient rich too.
And it's good for house plants.
Oh, yeah. You put African violets in that, boy, you'll have some of the biggest African violet plants you ever had. My mother used to do that when she was 5. She could grow some of the most, and I've grown orchids in mushroom compost too. Phalaenopsis and Cymbidiums and those.
Put orchid in that herb and that's it.
Yep, that's it.
Helps these sorts.
Yes, soil. If you done that in soil spike, you've got an egg. Yeah, yeah. You know how to solar fumigate? Get you a piece of black plastic and put over it when it's the hottest part of the summer. Put soil around the edges of it and let the heat build up in it for about 6, 7 days. You won't have a weed in there. That's the natural way of doing it. You don't want to use the fumigants if you don't have a license to get the fumigants. Both fumigants are deadly. I'd go to Deerfield Supplies and get it. Yeah, Fairview. 270-265. Hold on a minute. Let me go to my little calendar. I haven't dialed it in a long time. I just go up there and get what I need.
Does he fill up an entire raised bed?
Sure.
Like, isn't growing it?
Yeah, I've seen raised beds with nothing but mushrooms on them. They did fine. Okay. 270-265-2425. And talk to either Richard or Tim. Tim's his son.
Say that number again.
6, 7.
Okay, 270-265-2425.
Yeah.
But they are good. I trust them with my life on stuff. I don't get no kickback. I just try to help any. But they are some good people though. They know their stuff. They actually come from Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, is where they come from. Richard had a business out there just like this one, and he's had this one 27 years, I think, so far. And he built a brand new facility back last year. But they know what they're doing. They're Mennonites, is what they are, who they are. And like I said, soil test results are no better than the person that takes them. So remember that. But the more samples you get, the more accurate your soil test is going to be. That's why I like to take double the amount that's recommended. You take it at least 6 inches deep, get you a bucket, a clean bucket, not with a bunch of garbage in it or something. You keep a clean bucket because that will affect your analysis of your sample. And there's different ways of taking it. You can take it in a zigzag pattern, or like around your house, you can go zigzag around. There's multiple different ways. I've done it, I don't know how many ways when I was taking them. I still take them. Matter of fact, I've sent mine off already, so I should be getting them back any day now. I pretty much can guess what I need, but I keep an Excel spreadsheet. I've got an Excel spreadsheet of 33 years of soil tests that I've done on our farm. So I know how it's come up and went down and so on, because I can graph it. Shovel is one of your best methods. You take the outside part of that sample, get rid of it. You only want that part in the center. That's your true sample. That's where it's not contaminated. You can use a soil probe. They're a little more difficult to get the soil out of sometimes. The shovel's your easiest. I've got a soil probe. I got 3 or 4 soil probes, different lengths. So you put the shovel in the ground as deep as you work your garden or whatever. That's what you want to test. If it's like your yard, your lawn, you want to go about 3 inches on that, because most of your root system's about 3 inches deep in your lawn. Fruit trees, I usually dig down a foot, because that's how much we work our soil. We work our soils deep up there as we can. And of course, this is a soil pH meter that I was talking about. And that thing's worth every penny of it. If that thing would cost me $500 this day, if I had to buy a new one, I'd buy it in a heartbeat. Because it's nice. If you want to kind of get an idea of what your soil is, and I've compared it to the exact soil test where the sample was tested at, and this soil pH meter was right on the money every time. And that soil pH meter it'll be 40 years old in January. I was only 30 years old when I got it. Well, no, I'm 72 now. I've done told my age, so students think I'm in my early 50s. I like that. So they got 2 Mr. Smiths up there at the school. So I'm known as Papa Smith. That's how when they get on the intercom, they done it the first day of school. We need to have Mr. Smith come down to the front office. So Stephen run because he can. I had to walk real fast. And they say, which one do you need? And they've forgotten they've got 2 Mr. Smiths in the building. And we're the only father-son teachers that's in the building too, by the way. So I've been known as Papa Smurf too a couple of times. I don't care. I don't go by Mr. Smith because I don't want the kids thinking that I'm privileged or something. I'd rather just be called Mr. Smith and be done with it. That's what I told them too. All right, soil pH refers to the amount of hydrogen. Hydrogen is what changes the pH of the soil. Plain and simple. pH of soils in Tennessee goes anywhere from 4.5 to 7.5. I have seen soil pHs as high as 16 in the world. Now you talking about high, that's high. Normally out in Colorado, soil pH out there would maybe be like 10 or something, 10 and a half. These are 16, 17, it's a pH. And it affects nutrient availability, your pH does. That's why you got to put lime on. This is kind of rule of thumb, but the best thing to do is test your soil, get it accurate. 50 pounds, don't put any more than 50 pounds per 1,000 square feet. And then apply it if you need to decrease your soil pH, which there is places in this world that you have to do that. If you're raising blueberries or something, you have to decrease your pH. Well, you use sulfur, and you don't use very much of it because sulfur reacts quick. It don't take 6 months. It just takes weeks. So
Does the acid lovers fertilizer like Miracle-Gro, does it do anything to the pH?
yep, it lowers it.
Will lower it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Sure does. That's just a rule of thumb there. But the best thing is to soil test. And they do all this in the lab for you. You don't have to worry about it. And it'll be printed out on a sheet. This is a pH scale, an example. Coffee's got a pH of 4. So if you're putting coffee grounds on something, it won't take long to get that pH to 4 real quick. They're very acid. The milk of magnesia, which is an laxative, it's got a pH of about 10.5. So it's very alkaline. Is what we call it. It's either acidic or it's alkaline.
Don't get your.
Pure water is 7 if it's not contaminated. Milk is about 7. It's neutral. 7 is considered neutral. Natural rainfall is acid. Anywhere from about 4.5 to 6, depending on where you're at. I know there's some places in the world I have seen rainwater that was pH of 3 before.
This where I was a mass gardener in another state. They said though, don't use Starbucks because theirs had no change. So whatever they do when they
Yep.
process it, that's not good grounds, but they'll give it away.
Yep.
Don't use that. in your
No,
garden.
that's very, very, very acid. Their beans are. And there is grades of coffee beans. And Starbucks doesn't use the premium coffee beans. All right, this is your pH and nutrient availability based on your pH. And you can see nitrogen varies anywhere from about 5.5 to about 8.5. Phosphorus gets a little tricky. And it goes anywhere from about 6 to about, I'd say 7.5. It's a narrower margin of what nitrogen is. Your potassium, it's not as particular as your N and P. And then sulfur isn't really that sensitive to acid or alkaline soils. And when you get into calcium and magnesium, your iron, your manganese and all that, your iron, manganese and boron and copper and zinc, they tend to be more available in the acid range. And your molybdenum is when the pH is over 6.5, you put molybdenum on your soil, if the soil test says so. So that has to do with the higher pH. Zinc becomes not available when you got a higher pH. It's all right when you got the lower pH, but when you get in these higher pHs, talking 6.5 to 7.5, you're going to have a zinc deficiency and you're going to know it in a hurry, especially on your sweet corn and stuff like that. Of course, like I said, I've already went over this, complete, incomplete. You got organic fertilizers, inorganic, soluble, and insoluble. And then your complete, incomplete, I've went over that. Just remember, they got to have all 3 elements. Organic fertilizers, good old cow poop. Horse poop's good too. Chicken manure, be very careful with that because it is very hot in nature. In other words, the nutrients that's in it's high in nitrogen. And when you get chicken manure, and I've seen people burn up tobacco crops, putting too much chicken manure on their ground, and they'll plow it under a foot deep, but they just put way too much on it. And the tobacco, poor little old tobacco plants, they look good for the first 2 weeks, and then all of a sudden they start turning brown because that chicken manure's heating up underneath that soil and it's cooking it. So chicken manure is one that you gotta watch. It's good, but you want it decomposed. Compost is fine. don't get fresh manure. Of course, the advantages of organic, they're slow release. They don't leach from the soil very easily. They tend to stay around. And you can add organic components to the growing media. That goes back to your media. You can put organic composted manure in with your media. A year, at least a minimum of a year. Yeah. Yeah.
And most sources of chicken manure, unlike cow manure, it has kind of bedding with, so if your pine shavings or
Yeah. And straw, you got a high carbon nitrogen ratio. Pig manure too, but also too much pig manure can be detrimental too, because it's got a tendency to heat up too, like chicken manure does. Because when you feed pigs, they're fed a high protein diet. So that high protein diet's got a lot of nitrogen in it. That'll create the same thing as chicken poop does too. Same way. Yeah. All right. Disadvantages of organic. Sometimes it's hard to get. Sometimes you can get it and they'll just give it away. There was somebody up in Hopkinsville that was giving away horse manure just to get it out of the way to clean the stalls. And they'd load it for you. You bring your truck, your trailer or whatever, and they had a little skid loader and they'd load it for you. Just to get it out of the way because they had so much of it. So, and sometimes it's advertised in the peddlers where I used to see it at all the time. All right, it's not sterile though. That's the kicker. And it's going to have weed seed in it. So you need to do something about that weed seed. Compost it. And you'll get rid of the weed seed. It's got a low nutrient content, which is okay. I mean, as long as it's slow release, it just feeds the plant longer and the plant likes it like that. But it can be expensive though. But it just depends on the area that you're in where you can find some of this. I like mushroom compost. That has to be shipped in. It's not grown locally. I wish we had somebody here that grow mushrooms. They make a killing just off the mushroom compost doing that. I'd start raising mushrooms again, but I don't have the time. I'm getting too old to do that too. We used to raise mushrooms. All right, inorganic fertilizers. These are sources other than plants and animals. Of course, you can make any ratio you want. They're easy to get. They're lower cost. Well, let me reframe that statement. They were lower cost. They're not now. They're darn near as expensive as organic. They don't have any organic matter in them. And you can build, if you're using media, you can build up a salt content in your media. That's why you need to mix soil with your media, because soil is a buffer. If you make a mistake, that soil will correct it. It's forgiving. Media is not. All right, you got soluble fertilizer. That's like Miracle-Gro, something like that. Or the generic versions. And you apply it as a liquid solution. I use it all the time. I do use mushroom compost in a tea. I'll take it, put it in a barrel and let it sit there for a couple of days. And then I've got a little spigot down at the bottom of the barrel and I can drain it off and water it, my mushroom compost tea, which is nice. You can do it with chicken manure and all that too. Insoluble fertilizer, those are the slow release ones like Osmocote. It's coated with a sulfur coating, and every time you water, it releases nutrients. You can always see it. It don't look like it's doing anything, but every time you water or it rains on it, it releases nutrients. I use that a lot too. I use a lot of Osmocote. That's a brand name. And then, of course, granular and slow release. Granular's not very expensive. Slow release, it's $100 for a 50-pound bag. But that's cheap compared to what it's worth in the long run. Because you can put it on and you can get it either to last for a year, 2 years, 3 months, or 9 months. You get those kind of formulations. So it's almost like putting it on one time and forget about it. And you can get it with micronutrients too, and without micronutrients. I've got both. Depends on what I'm using it for. If I raise corn in 3-gallon pots, I'll use the micronutrient version. That way I don't have to worry about it. And as the nutrients are released from your slow release fertilizer, they get more uniform in releasability of it. And we've talked about fertilizer analysis. I'm not going to go over that again. Applications, there's different ways of putting it on. And each one of these has got a reason for doing it. Banding, you put it along the side of the plant. Don't get it where the root system is or you'll burn it because of the salt that's in the fertilizer. Side dressing's the same way. We used to side dress tobacco all the time doing that. And we used to do seed corn fields like that too. And I've done it with vegetables too. I've done it. I've made my own little side dresser. I've got one of them push side dressers that I made years ago. Perforating is where you drill holes. Like if you've got a shade tree, you want to fertilize it. You drill holes underneath that shade tree in different spots. And then you drop your fertilizer spike down in it. They make fertilizer spikes about that long for trees. You just drop that whole sucker down that hole, cover it up. Roots will find it. So that's what that's called. And then broadcasting's putting it all over the area. That's one of the most common ones. Foliar is spraying it over on the top of the plant. And you got to watch what you're doing with that too, because you can burn the leaves on the plant, especially if you've got high humidity like we've had this year. And then fertigation is adding fertilizer to your irrigation. If you've got drip tape where you drip tape your garden to water it, you can add it in there when you're watering it with your drip tape. Pretty neat. I've done that more than once too. Of course, banding, we've already been through all these. Like I said, you can burn the roots. I've used all these methods before at one time, and you'll probably have a chance to use some of those methods too in your experience as being a master gardener. All right, if you do everything right, that's our last peach crop we had. That is a white peach. And on the other side is broccoli. That broccoli was at my waist when that picture was took. And it was just starting to make broccoli heads when I took that picture. No, because you got to watch what kind of broccoli variety you plant, because varieties has got different cold tolerances. If you don't have a broccoli variety that is either tolerant to heat or cold, it will not produce the crop you expect it to. And if you need varieties, Carla gets the plants for the community garden from me. I've been raising them for years for her. And probably this year was probably one of the best years I ever had on cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, kale, collards and all that. I mean, but I picked the varieties based on cold tolerance and heat tolerance. And it made the difference. Now you can get a cold tolerant broccoli variety and it can get down to 18 degrees with those and never hurt it. They're as hardy as cabbage is. But you get one that's not cold tolerant, them plants will look like crap the whole growing season and they will not make the heads will be deformed. Been down that road. So variety selection is very important. And if you need to know what variety, I can give you some guidance on that.
Today, today, fruits,
Yeah. And that depends on the temperature too, because it can be as early as 2 weeks early than what they say it's going to be. Like the broccoli this year, the cauliflower, it was 3 weeks earlier than what the company said it was going to be, because we had warmer nights, we had warmer days. And it changed the maturity. So, and then you got soil conditioners, which we've talked about. And they're good. I mean, all of them, all your soil conditioners. And I use cover crops. I use crimson clover and vetch and rye. If I want a cover crop that I wanted earlier, where I can get it plowed under or rototilled under, I'll use barley, because barley's a whole lot earlier. And it's just mixed in with the crimson clover and the vetch. But the tilth of that soil is unreal. It's just like an ash pan. It just crumbles apart when you work it. And it don't crust either when you plant something in it. Of course, we talked about these conditioners.
When you buy, for example,
No, it's not been as aged what that bag says. I've had some problems with weed seed and cow manure before. It may say composted on it, but that's not always true. It can be deceiving.
also the Robbie plant killer. It's someone about the black cow. Beans and peas being kind of deformed.
Yeah, yeah. And it depends on where they get that topsoil. A lot of this topsoil you buy at your mass marketers, they just go out in the field and just take a loader and just start scooping it. And if they've used chemicals, which they more than likely have, different herbicides to kill weeds, you're going to have that in that soil. So the best organic weed killer is corn glue. That's a byproduct of corn. And it's been used for years and years and years. Most people don't know it even exists, but Richard and Tim at Deerfield Supplies sells corn glue. You can buy it by the bag, a 50-pound bag, or you can buy it in a 2,000-pound tote. But you better have your pocketbook ready when you get it, because it's not cheap, but it works, because I've used it before. The reason I did, because I was raising some corn breeding material that was sensitive to herbicides, and I had to get the plants large enough where I could get them converted. And that's what I did. All right, your soil test looks something similar to like that. It'll be more detailed, but it looks something similar to that. And then here's another. There's strawberries in gutters, like the guttering that you use on your house. For 4 years, I raised strawberries in gutters. Just put them on the benches, put 4 on a 4-foot bench. I had strawberries just as big and a whole lot cleaner than what they were out there in the field, even with straw mulch. That at the bottom, those are potatoes. Yep. That's some of the baby potatoes.
He's in that big.
And that's color, or that's broccoli up there at the top again. There's the strawberries in the gutters. And that's one of our gardens right there next to the peach orchard. Of course, that peach orchard is matured now, but that's what our soil looks like.
Is there a better strawberry variety?
Depends on what you want to do with it.
I just don't like the ones.
Oh, I don't grow little teeny tiny strawberries. I grow giant ones. Chandler was one of the best that come out of California. It was a large, sweet. It didn't have the pithy inside like most big large strawberries do. And they've got a couple of other new ones that's out. I don't even know right off the top of my head, but I can get them. All right, my cell phone number is 931-801-0449. You can call me or text me. I get texts every day, especially from the school. That's how they communicate with us, through text.
Where do you get your like strawberry? Where do you find them?
I can give you some growers that's their specialty. I'll just put out 5 acres. You'll be good. You supply all of Montgomery County. We used to raise 5 acre strawberries, pick your own, years ago. But you know why? You gotta ship 3,000 miles. That's what's the matter with our vegetables now. They're bred to be shipped. They're not bred for flavor. And I told the plant breeders in the vegetable industry, I said, you need to put flavor back in these varieties. Quit worrying about shipping them. You can take care of the shipping part. You need to get flavor back in. I said, the consumer would be happy, can. Yeah. Yeah, the consumer would pay extra just to get fresh. That's what the people like about the cabbage and everything. When they stop by out of the blue, can we buy a head of cabbage? $5. And the heads weigh 10 or 12 pounds a piece. You won't go to Walmart and get a 12-pound head for $5. It's gonna cost you about 82 to 92 cents a pound. And it's crap. And Walmart. 9355 Russellville Road. You go on 79, go past the Kentucky Tennessee Livestock Auction Facility, done went too far. Because we were bordered right onto their property. About 10 acres of it. Bought that place 33 years ago. Paid for it in 6 years. We grossed in 1996, and I'm not lying, we grossed off that 10 acres, $352,000 of produce off that farm. So I went and paid for it. We had it financed for 10 years. I wasn't gonna pay all that extra interest for 30 years. So it's paid for. Don't have to worry about a risk. My wife was one happy camper. I kept bringing her the wads of money that I had in my pocket. She went to the bank.
No, this time too.
Oh,
No, I wasn't teaching.
Yeah.
I didn't get pulled out of retirement. They couldn't find a teacher that was certified in biology. In Christian County, I taught in Todd County. Then we ended up going to Montgomery or to Christian County this year. And the reason I got hired because they couldn't find nobody that could teach molecular level stuff. Not even the regular science teachers could teach. And they still don't know what I'm saying.